My name's Mark Williamson. I run Action for Happiness. We're hosting this event this evening. Welcome back to all of you who've been before. Great to see so many familiar faces. And a very big warm welcome to everyone else who's here for the first time. Action for Happiness, as you hopefully know, is all about a movement of people that really care about creating a genuinely, authentically happier world where, I guess, fewer of us are struggling with stress, anxiety, isolation, all the malaises that modern life is throwing at us. And actually more of us are able to live happy, meaningful, fulfilling lives in whatever way that is possible for us. And one of the questions we're asked most often in connection with the work that we do, and many of you will know one of our founders is Richard Layard, who's actually here with us this evening, who's done a lot of work on what is it that contributes to the happiness of individuals and to nations. One of the questions is, so which countries are the happiest then? If the UK isn't a particularly happy place relative to some others, where are people getting it right? And as I'm sure you've all seen as you've come along this evening, one of the answers to that question is often Denmark. And in fact, I'm delighted that Helen could be with us this evening because she had this unique experience, I think, really, of being immersed, as many of us are, in UK life, and then having the opportunity to go and live in Denmark and actually find out why is it that so many Danes, when asked in these surveys around the world, you know, how happy are you, report much, much higher scores than we often do in the UK and indeed in many other countries that you imagine might be quite similar in terms of economic development and other things. So this evening we're going to be asking that question: what is it that makes individuals and countries happy? What contributes to that? And what is it in particular that they do in Denmark that might be interesting for all of us, maybe to compare with life in the UK and maybe to think about things we can each do that make a difference. So really looking forward to hearing what Helen has to say. Also looking forward to getting your reactions as well. This is going to be interactive like so many of our events are. So keen to hear what you think and whether you have experience of Denmark personally or indeed whether you can kind of relate what we hear back to your own lives and your experience of life in the UK. So great to have you here. At the end, I'll tell you a little bit more about some things we've got coming up. But for now, I'd just like to introduce Helen, who's here with us this evening. Her book is available. I really recommend it. It's fantastic. And she's going to share her story about living Danishly, moving to Denmark and experiencing this slightly different culture. Please welcome Helen Russell.
Thank you. Thanks very much. That's me. Hi there. Thank you so much for having me, and a pleasure to be here. So I am here today to talk about happiness, as Mark said, about how an archetypal Londoner, like many of you, I suspect, was offered the opportunity to make a change in the way I lived, really. So I was doing, as many of you probably are, working hard, not giving too much thought perhaps to whether my priorities were the right ones, but I had a busy job in London as a journalist on a glossy magazine. I had a nice flat, I had good friends, I had close family, but there was a feeling that, was that it? Was this all that there was to life? And then I got the opportunity to, as Mark said, make a change in the way I lived and see if it could make me happier. So I would like to share that story with you, if that's okay. So I was working hard. We thought we were doing everything right in life to be happy. Okay, so we'd had permanent colds on and off for the last 6 months and tonsillitis and hangovers, but we just thought that was normal, right? My husband and I lived in North London in a flat in Zone 2. We tried to make it nice. It was very small. It was underground, a bit like a hobbit house. But we were doing everything we thought we should be. We both worked very long hours, so often only encountered the other person as a warm body in the bed at night. And we didn't really have much time to see the family and friends that we held so dear. But we again thought that was normal, so we didn't give too much thought to it. We'd also been trying for a baby for as long as either of us could remember. But we were so tired and stressed all the time that it just wasn't working. After 2 years of fertility treatment, we were broken. And then my husband was offered this opportunity to work for Lego in Denmark. And we were just given this chance out of the blue to swap everything we knew for the unknown, which was terrifying. And I loved Sandy Tosvik, I loved Borgen, I loved the killing, but I didn't know that much more about Denmark. I probably couldn't have pointed it to you on a map. And the idea of swapping life and making this leap and going for it was terrifying. But I'd heard there were good pastries. I liked the killing. So we went for a weekend for a recce. And when I stepped off the plane, I saw this, which many of you may also have seen. And I was just about to kind of call advertising standards when I sort of started doing some research, started Googling, as many of us do, and found out that Denmark has, in fact, regularly been voted the happiest country in the world, as Mark said, in studies going back to the 1970s. So this isn't just a recent thing. This is, 40-plus years of hardcore happiness in this tiny nation of just 5.5 million people. That's the same size as South London. I mean, just extraordinary. And I was fascinated by this. And the more, we emerged from the airport, tried the beer, it was very good, tried the pastries, they were good, and then started looking around, really, at the other Danes around us, primarily in Legoland, so they were fairly happy. But the first thing we noticed was that the Danes we met didn't look like us, quite apart from the fact that they were all Vikings, towering over my 5'3" frame on a good day. They looked more relaxed as well. They walked more slowly. They took the time to look at their surroundings. I was just noticing one of the Action for Happiness posters there. They did that in a way that I certainly didn't do in London, and I don't know if you do. I was normally sort of eyes down or eyes up, just get to where I had to be. But the Danes we met in rural Jylland, so not Copenhagen, not the big city, in the rural part of Denmark, they were looking around, they were taking their time to stop and talk to each other and eat together often, and just breathe. And we were really impressed by this. And then we came home, and everything seemed a bit different. This other life possibility had been dangled in front of us, and we now had to choose whether we were going to take it or not. And it was terrifying, but we sort of ended up deciding, well, if not now, then when? And why not? And we had no reason not to. So somehow, I agreed. There was probably wine involved, but I agreed. And I quit my job, and everyone thought I was insane. And I decided that I would give it a year. So I thought, well, I'll go freelance. The beauty of being a journalist is that I can do that. I thought I would work as a Scandinavia correspondent for UK newspapers. And my main objective was to dig into this happiness idea. So intention set, objective outlined. I thought I would look at a different area of Danish living each month to see what Danes did differently, whether I could steal the best bits and take it with me to make a change in my life. So, bravely, we moved in the middle of winter from bustling Zone 2 to this. It was not Copenhagen, it was not even a city, it was -20, and it was very cold and very bleak. And my husband left to go to work at 8 a.m., and I had no friends, I had no family, I had no job, and I thought perhaps I just made the biggest mistake of my life. So as a repressed ex-Catholic schoolgirl, I did what any good girl would do, and try to eat my emotions instead. The good thing about Denmark, even for a brand new arrival who knows nothing, is that you're never far from a bakery. And I made my way to my local one and worked my way through the array of pastries. And for a while, I thought maybe they would make me feel better and that I'd have cracked the Danish happiness phenomenon on day one. I don't know how many of you have had Danish pastries in Denmark. Maybe. No murmurings. You've got so much ahead of you. This is exciting. They are nothing like the kind of part dry, part soggy offerings that we get over here in Tesco's. And so sinking my teeth into pastry that's sort of gooey and then soft and then sort of zingy in turn sent dopamine surging through my body. And then the sugar crash came, and I realized I was going to have to work a little harder at this Danish happiness thing. But fortunately, my first lesson in what it really is to live Danishly came not long after, when the roads cleared and offices emptied, because rush hour in Denmark is 4 p.m. And that was really when I started to learn about this work-life balance thing. So I just about had a chance to brush the pastry crumbs off myself, have some lunch, answer some emails, when my other half was home again from work at 4 p.m. And I took this to be first day exception, like easing the new boy in gently. But the next day it happened again. And the day after that. And the one after that. And then Friday rolled around, and he was home at 2:30 p.m. I had sort of my hair unbrushed, still in my pajamas, coffee cups around my desk. Like my hair is often in the unbrushed state, I'm afraid. I wondered whether something had happened. I was talking, ironically, to a time management expert in Boston. And then my husband rolls in, and I immediately thought, oh my goodness, has he been fired? Is something wrong? Has Lego melted? But no, he assured me, people just leave even earlier on a Friday, which I found extraordinary. So I did some digging. As a journalist, I like to do my research, find out the facts, and I discovered that the official working week in Denmark is 37 hours, so still far fewer than the 50-plus hour weeks we were used to putting in back home. But the average Dane actually only works for 34 hours a week, according to statistics. So that leaves 134 hours a week to just have a nice time, eat pastries. And because of this, Denmark has the happiest workforce in the EU. They come top of the world in terms of worker motivation. But this doesn't make Danes slackers. So the obvious, like the old capitalist argument is, well, if you're not going to work so hard, then the country's not going to be very productive. But actually, workers are more productive if you're in a positive state of mind, as I'm sure many of you know. And Denmark comes third in worker productivity in the whole of the EU. So there's something about this that's working, and I started digging into it a little bit more and speaking to everyone who would take the time to talk to the crazy Englishwoman and calling up experts, and people were very kind with their time and took pity on me, I think, moving to rural Denmark in winter. And I discovered a little bit more about the way Danes do things. So they have this amazing word that I apologize to any Danes or indeed Scandinavians in general in the audience, arbeidsglæde, which is from the Danish arbejde, which is to work, and glæde, which is happiness. And it literally means happiness at work, something that is essential for the good life, and this word doesn't exist outside of the Nordic languages, but everyone in Denmark knows about it. So because of this arbejdsglæde, everybody prioritizes happiness at work. They know this is something that's important, and they make sure that they're going to get it. And there's a very flat hierarchical structure, so it's totally okay to call out your boss or challenge a colleague, and there's a real consensus culture, so that by the time any decision is made, everyone's sort of bought into it and everyone feels that they're invested in a little bit. So this kind of relaxed atmosphere, these great working hours, are really contributing to Danes having a pretty good time at work. And because Danes still get to study for free and even get paid for it over the age of 18 with student grants, remember them, more of them can study to do a job they actually like, which of course means you're going to be slightly happier at work. Nobody's going to be incentivized to be an accountant, no offense any accountants, because you're not, if they don't want to be, because you're going to pay high taxes anyway, and you could study whatever you like. So people are having a pretty good time of it. There's still workplace stress and there's still antidepressant use, but that's because Danes expect this arbejdsglæde. They expect to be happy. And if they're not, they do something about it. So whereas in the UK, we have this culture of soldiering on because admitting that sort of weakness could really harm your career prospects. In Denmark, there's no question of that. Doctors and employers are really sensitive to it, and you take 6 months off and you get the help you need and you come back more productive than ever if the studies are to be believed. And there's no question that you will get the help you need, which I found fascinating. I spoke to people who actually got promotions whilst off on stress leave, which just wouldn't happen over here. I mean, it's just... But, 1 in 4 of us will suffer from mental health problems. That's a quarter of us in this room. But I'm willing to bet that a quarter of us haven't gone to our employer and said, actually, do you know what, can I have some time off? It just doesn't happen over here, and certainly not in the US when I've spoken to people over there about it. So that was fascinating to me to get my head around. And my husband was home a lot. So... getting this work-life balance thing sorted, we suddenly found we had a lot of time, just the two of us, living by the sea in rural Denmark, not quite sure what to do about it. In London, we had lots of friends and family and no time to see them. And suddenly we had all the time in the world and only each other to spend it with. And I am not one of those people who can while away a weekend staring into a loved one's eyes with occasional loo breaks. I need people and activities and plans. I needed really to fill all these hours that we had. And so I wanted to do as the Danes do. And my next sort of sideline in terms of what Danes do differently is they have this real love of lifelong learning. And so we went back to school. I probably sat around here, and my husband was moved to the other side because we got told off for talking. Nothing has changed in 25 years. So Danes have this love of lifelong learning, and they regularly go to evening classes, and both of these things have really been proven to boost brain power and help with happiness. So we thought, well, I want in. I'm going to try this. Danes mostly speak excellent English, as well as a smattering of German, Italian, French. They do art classes, they do pottery. But we thought, well, we better start with the basics, and so signed up for Danish language classes. And the nice lady at the local council told us that we could have Danish language classes for free for 3 years. And we just thought, firstly, this was insanely generous. And secondly, that it would never take us that long. We were fools. So, I don't know, so anyone who's watched The Killing or Borgen or The Bridge may have tried to sort of read the subtitles and work out what on earth is going on. It's officially the 9th hardest language in the world, Danish. I am campaigning to have that pushed a bit higher up. Oh my word, it's impossible. And there's also a real difference in the learning materials used to teach language to adults, certainly in Denmark. And whereas anyone who grew up in the 80s or 90s will be familiar with the Tricolore books, who learnt French in this country. So all about, Jean-Luc goes up to his bedroom to Écoute des disques or Aller à la piscine, all inexplicably in La Rochelle. In Denmark, things get a bit dark. They get a bit Nordic noir quite early on. So we had stories about a woman going to the doctor for urinary tract infection, how to seek treatment. My husband didn't know when he was going to find that one handy. We had stories about a woman whose husband has accidentally impregnated a colleague. Awkward. And my favourite was about a woman who went on a crime spree because the voices in her head told her to. It's just extraordinary. I mentioned it to our teacher, and sort of she looked at me quite straight-faced, like, this is normal, what is your problem? And said that it made learning more exciting, and perhaps it made normal life seem a bit more, you're a bit more grateful for your normal life because it's not as bad as the textbook. So maybe there's something in that, I don't know. But, the lifelong learning, I can see why it's a good thing. It didn't make me any happier, it just made me feel wholly inadequate. And also, all of our classmates were other internationals. So to really get under the skin of living Danishly, I decided I need some actual Danish friends and had to find out what the Danes were doing. What were they filling their time with? And it was mostly this, as it turns out. Amongst other things, but Danes love cycling. Has anyone who's ever been there has probably seen them whizzing by. 50% of Copenhageners cycle to work. They commute to work. And every Dane owns at least one bike. But what Danes do differently is that they turn what would be a casual bike ride into a group event. So there are numerous clubs and associations for cycling, as well as any type of exercise. So this was really interesting to me because I thought, well, we all know about the mental and physical benefits of exercise and the way that can help you be happier. But what Danes are doing differently is they're doing it together, which fosters a sense of belonging, which makes you more likely to stick at it because you're doing it with other people. You don't want to let your teammates down or your group members. And it really it gives it a sense of purpose. So I found this really interesting and decided to make like the Danes and sign up myself, ever the joiner. I tried cycling, didn't like the lycra so much. I tried swimming, because that's meant to release endorphins. I tried yoga, because that slashes stress and I think is good for serotonin levels. I tried advanced cooking. This was ambitious, because learning a new skill is meant to improve mental well-being. And I joined a choir, because singing releases endorphins, and doing it as part of a group slashes stress and also can ward off depression and sort of improve mental well-being, according to, I think it's a recent Yale and Harvard study. So I thought, well, this is amazing, and I loved singing in my choir, and singing in Danish, who knows what I was singing? I mean, it could have been obscenities, I have no idea. And I had a great time, but still no one spoke to me. I wasn't making any more Danish friends. And this is because Danes, as anyone who's been there may have experienced, or I think it's throughout Scandinavia really, Danes are a lot like Londoners in the respect that you don't smile at strangers, you don't make eye contact, and you certainly don't strike up conversation. So I soon realised that to actually really try leaving Danishly, I was going to have to be a bit more proactive and had to go up to people and talk to them and try and sort of introduce myself, which I discovered was a lot like dating. I had to ask for people's phone numbers, I had to suggest meeting up, and although this isn't exclusive to living Danishly, I mention it because for me it was a really interesting exercise in allowing myself to be vulnerable and a good sort of exercise in authenticity as well. Two things that are crucial for anything approaching a kind of content life. And making new friends as a grown-up is quite humbling. And it's interesting making friends on the merit of who I am now rather than my 15-year-old self or my 25-year-old self even. I had to open myself up to try new things. Whereas in London, we're all busy and my friend book was metaphorically closed. I didn't need any more friends. Suddenly, I was having to be open and having to be open to new ideas and new things. So I took the policy, the Danny Wallace-style policy of saying yes to everything, and found myself, I had to go to my first Tupperware party. That was not so much fun. I found myself driving 2 hours to tour around the country's oldest theatre. I watched a blizzard at sunset in a hot tub. My husband got roped into flyering for a drum and bass night. And so we just, we just gave it a go. And some of these people, it didn't really work out. And some of them weren't crazy about me either. But that was okay. It was liberating and it was interesting. And I felt as though, gosh, well, if I've done it here, I can kind of do it anywhere. And having the distance from people back home also made me appreciate friendships there more. And it allowed for, I don't know how to put this nicely, it allowed for a conscious uncoupling of acquaintances who I perhaps wasn't so fond of anymore, or people who weren't such great friends. Did a bit of a cull. Fine, harsh but fair. So anyone here made the cut. So that was really interesting, and it was a really useful experience. And once I started befriending some Danes, they let me in on the sort of the inner world of living Danishly, and some of the key things about how to be happy Danish style. The first thing I learnt was that there's no word for please in Denmark. Did you know that? I did not. This cut out a good third of my vocabulary at the fell swoop. As a kind of a people-pleasing Brit, I didn't know what to do with myself. But Danes don't go in for politeness in the traditional sense. So you'll have doors slammed in your face. I mean, if you drop your shopping, you're picking it up on your own. Danes don't, it's not something that's important to them. It's not something that they value, because for Danes, it's all about honesty. So since I started befriending Danes, I've been told that I'm looking a bit fat, that I'm having a bad hair day, that my interior decor looks a little bit like a civil servant's, and that I don't have enough books to be considered intellectual, which is lovely. But do you know what? It's fine. I find it funny now, and really, when you think about it, it's easier to be honest. It's better that way. I was having a bad hair day. The woman who said that about my books hadn't seen my upstairs bookcases. So, fine. And Danes just don't say yes when they mean no, which is a pretty good lesson to live by. So, you don't say we must catch up if you don't want to see them. You don't ask someone around for dinner if you don't want them to turn up at your doorstep, because they will. I mean, I had made a throwaway comment once to my neighbours about that they should pop round to a barbecue when we were having some other friends over, some English friends to stay. And they came, and I'm an idiot, of course. Of course, why would you say something you don't mean? But we all do it routinely. I certainly did, and tried to do it slightly less now. But, if a Dane tells you you're looking great today or says that they like you, you can probably trust that they mean it and there's no ulterior motive. And I found that really refreshing. Life's kind of easier that way. The next thing, once I was admitted into the inner circle of my new Danish friends, I was allowed into their homes, which as a lifelong fan of Through the Keyhole was a treat. So the first thing I noticed was this lamp. This flipping lamp is a Paul Henningsen lamp. People might have seen it on Borgen or on The Killing or any other sort of Scandi show ever. Paul Henningsen, a Danish designer, and this is called the PH5 lamp, that 50% of Danish homes have at least one of in. Extraordinary. And these are not cheap, but for Danes, there's a real pride in buying Danish and investing in Danish design, which is world famous, and they save up and they think, well, that's important, I want this lamp. And this particular lamp is fascinating because underneath here, there are colours. There's sort of a purple and a red bit. And the designer apparently came up with this lamp because he wanted to make a flattering light for his wife while she was eating her dinner. I don't know if this was at his request or her request, but the idea is that you have enough light so you can see your food, but not enough so that you can see the wrinkles of your diners. So everyone looks great and you can see your food, and you hang it just at a certain amount above the table, and it works. So most Danish homes have this lamp, interesting, and they all had these enormous dining room tables as well, like at least 8-seaters. Our 6-seater felt very mean by comparison. And this is because dining together is something that's really important to most Danes. And I just read, actually, a study in the American Clinical Nutritional Journal saying that having a home-cooked meal and eating together has been shown to really boost happiness levels. And Danes do this every day because they work shorter hours than we do here, and because eating out is a bit more expensive. Eating a home-cooked family meal is a non-negotiable daily event. And so they have these big tables. It's incredibly sociable. So they have beautiful tables, beautiful lamps, beautiful chairs, Arne Jacobsen. And it's just something that Danes invest in because they're proud of. And Denmark has been described to me as a design society. It's been something that's been very important since the 1920s. There was an economic recession, but the government at the time decided that actually design is something that's really important for well-being and happiness, and so they invested in it. They invested in public sculptures, architecture, in schools, in hospitals, and they just thought this is important for happiness. And they were right, and about 90 years ahead of their time, because recent studies from I think it's Kingston, have shown that looking at beautiful objects of art and design can make us happier, and that looking at just one beautiful design item like this can create the same feelings in us as being in love, which I just found amazing. So that Danish people are walking into their homes feeling this rush of love as everyone looks great lit by their lamps, just by going home every day. So of course they're going to be happier. So Danish homes all look like something out of a weekend living supplement, with kind of white walls, wooden floors, great designer touches. And the Danes we met were incredibly proud of their homes, and they wanted to be hospitable and have people back there, and really proud of their Danish designers. And Danes are big on pride. The other thing I noticed around the place was the flag. The flag was everywhere. Anyone who's ever been to Denmark will see this outside offices, outside shops. If it's someone's birthday in Denmark, the flag will be covering their office desk or all around their door. It's something that the Danish flag is supposed to have fallen from heaven, the only flag allegedly to have done this. In the 13th century, Danes were losing a war, and so they prayed to God, and instead of sending manpower or military supplies or even snacks, God sent the flag. But they were jolly grateful, and they won, so fine. But the flag, Danes are really proud to fly it. Lots of Danish homes have a flagpole in their garden, which just seems a very quaint and jaunty thing for this Englishwoman arriving there. And whereas flying the flag in the UK is seen as an almost political act, maybe it was given a brief reprise during the 2012 Olympics or at the birth of a royal baby. Generally, we just don't do it. It's a bit dodge, UKIP, dodge. In Denmark, it's not the case at all. It's flown all the time with absolute pride. And most Danes are proud of being Danish, something else that's been proven to boost happiness levels. It seems very un-British, but being really proud of your country, not in a kind of ridiculously over-the-top way, but just feeling a sort of quiet contentment with where you're from and your national identity has been something that's proven to make you happier. So I was fascinated by this, and we began to see it everywhere, and it's used also to celebrate lots of rituals. There are many traditions in Danish life. Denmark is one of the most irreligious countries in the world. I think the idea in common with its Scandinavian neighbours, you don't really have to pray to God that everything's going to be okay in Scandinavia because the state pretty much has that sorted. So they're not religious at all, but they've kept all of the church festivals as an excuse for a party. So everybody will shut down whatever they're doing in November, and they'll bulk buy duck for St. Morten's Aften, which is St. Morten's feast. And they'll at Easter, they'll cut out bits of paper into essentially like paper doilies for Easter, for no good reason. They'll celebrate with special buns in February. And at each of these times, the flag will be flying. And these regular rituals have also been proven to unite people and improve levels of contentment. So right now in Denmark, it's fine that I'm here because the whole country shuts down for July. Everyone takes their holiday en masse. And it's called collective restoration. The Swedes have just been studying it. This also contributes to well-being because there's no question that whilst you're on holiday, you should just check that email or just call in with a colleague because everyone's off. And you know that you're going to be able to hang out with your friends and family because they're going to be on holiday as well. And by the time everyone goes back to work in August, I mean, literally the whole of Denmark is shut down. There's nobody around. It's a ghost town. By the time everyone goes back in August, everyone is rested and rejuvenated and ready to, face the next challenge. And if Danes need a little pick-me-up break after that to get their Zen back on track, they have this amazing thing which you may have experienced called hygge, which sounds a little like you're clearing your throat, hygge. But it defies literal translation, but this is the best explanation I've seen. A complete absence of anything annoying or emotionally overwhelming, taking pleasure from the presence of gentle, soothing things. What that doesn't explain is that there's usually cake involved, or coffee, or beer, and candlelight. Danes burn the most candles in the whole of Europe. I think it's along with the pH lamp. They like everyone to be looking nice, flattering light, very important in Denmark. So this hygge is really about spending time with friends and family and just pressing pause on daily life for a moment. And it's something that all Danes do all the time. It can be an adjective or a noun. You can do hygge, you can have a hygge time. And it really just helps unite people. It's very much linked to the weather in Denmark. In the bone-chilling winter months, you get hygge inside with candles and coffee. In summer, you might have an ice cream on a park bench and just have a little moment to yourself. It's a real culture of indulgence in a way that we don't really do in the UK unless we're about to guilt-trip ourselves about it. So I found the hygge thing incredibly useful when I first moved there in bleak midwinter. Because at a time in the UK when everyone else is manically dieting or abstaining from alcohol or starting a new exercise regime, and it's no fun at all come January. Danes don't go in for that. They don't do enforced deprivation. They're kind to themselves and they're gentle to each other, and that makes you a nicer person. I mean, hygge is not to be underestimated in the UK come January. But in Denmark, that just doesn't happen. It's not the case. So, as one Danish friend put it, hygge helps us to be nice to each other. And I could really see that after just a few weeks in Denmark. It became very clear that this was important. And this culture of not depriving yourself means that you're not going to yo-yo. You're not going to swing and eat all the buns and then eat none of the buns. Just a bun a day, fine, no problem. So the next thing I learned about what really helps Danes to be happy is trust. So this is a pram left on a beach with a sleeping baby in it. And babies are regularly left to sleep in their prams outside cafes and restaurants in Denmark because Danes trust that they'll be safe. There's this fabulous statistic that 79% of Danes trust most people, which I found extraordinary. I mean, I don't trust 79% of my blood relatives. Bizarre. But, and in the UK, the levels of trust have dropped hugely in recent years. So I think they've gone from 60% to 30% in the last 50 years. And having grown up in the 80s with the full force of the Stranger Danger campaign, and, we were taught to trust less at school. Whereas in Denmark, kids are encouraged to trust. They're encouraged to think that people are essentially good and the world is probably a decent place. And this trust is rewarded, really, because Denmark is the least corrupt country in the EU. Politicians are even trusted in Denmark, can you imagine? So, notoriously untrusted in every other society ever. Politicians are thought of as normal people in Denmark. like in Borgen. They're really approachable, they're reasonable for the most part, and people trust them. So they're paying these 50% plus taxes, which we'll get onto later, don't worry about it. They're paying these taxes because they trust that the government will spend their money wisely, and they trust that their fellow Danes will also contribute. So everybody's paying their fair share, and it kind of works like that. And as one Danish friend put it to me, nobody steals babies in Denmark, which was lucky because halfway through our year of living Danishly, I found out that finally I was expecting a baby. It was not triplets, do not worry. But at the start of 2014, I've aged him. I gave birth to a baby boy, and it was this experience that really won me round to the advantages of living Danishly, because in Denmark, parents get 52 weeks leave to share between them. So Danish dads have been doing their fair share and having paternity leave for decades now. And, you know, mothers can take that time, they can get better, they can recover, and when children are 6 months old, they can go to good quality, state-subsidised daycare, subsidised by taxes, 75% subsidised. So this at a time when friends in the UK were having to give up their jobs or work less because childcare is so expensive. In Denmark, it's just normal. So my husband took 2 weeks off post-birth and then went back to work, tied up a few loose ends, building Lego, whatever it is he does. And then he took 10 weeks off, his big shiny job. He took 10 weeks off, fully paid, to stay home and take care of his baby whilst I wrote this book, because it's recognised in Denmark that a man bonding with his child and understanding how this works, this parenting malarkey, is helpful. And as a result, he learned to bond with his son far sooner than friends I knew in the UK, where the guys were only able to spend time with their children at the weekends because they were home past their bedtimes during the week. So it really sort of underlined to me what a different way of looking at it is. My husband understood how you can feel like you're going insane by 2 p.m. on a Tuesday when all you want is an hour's interrupted sleep and maybe a shower. I mean, he knew that looking after a child is incredibly rewarding, but that it's also immensely hard work. And sometimes you just need someone to say, you're doing a good job, here's some cake. He sort of got it, and only having done the whole parenting thing in Denmark, I am slightly terrified about what it would be like to do it here, because it's tough enough as it is without being on your own. So for me, that was something that was really helpful. And in Denmark, it really feels as though that caregiving is valued as highly as breadwinning. The fact that paternity leave is just a done thing there, and that the parental leave is shared. Caregiving is just as important as breadwinning, and it doesn't matter who's doing what. Both types of work are necessary. Whether you have kids or whether you don't have kids, the whole world needs to carry on, and both of these things need to be valued. So in Denmark, it really felt, from the experience of having a child there, that there's not such a definition between women's work and men's work. It's just work, and they're both hard, and they're both brilliant, and they're both important. And it seems like Danes are just getting that a bit better than perhaps the rest of us are. So because of this great childcare, and because working hours allow you to have a family, because it's perfectly normal to leave at 4 p.m. because you've got to pick up your kid from daycare and start dinner, 80% of mothers return to work because they can and because they choose to and they enjoy it. And there's a lot of, we've all heard about attachment theory and things, but most of the studies saying that children put into childcare below 1 year old, for instance, the studies say that you're basically torturing them by doing that. None of them are from Scandinavia, where this routinely happens. And as the Danish friends I spoke to about it said, well, do you think that the entire country is messed up because we go to daycare early? And the answer is no. I mean, they all seem pretty happy and well adjusted. So the sort of guilt I felt about that at the start slowly ebbed away, and actually I saw that it's a pretty good deal for everyone involved. Everyone's having quite a nice time. And actually kids' nurseries are insanely good fun, and I would like to go to one. So this, which leads me on to a little bit, I would just like to get in a picture of her, really. She's not the Danish Prime Minister, sadly. But to things about women in Denmark more generally. So as Borgen and The Killing showed us, strong women are valued in Denmark. No questions asked. even from the mere physicality aspect, so women are not expected to ping back into shape after having a baby in Denmark. The Viking woman is strong and healthy rather than skinny. And as these TV shows that really made it big around the world showed, there were female protagonists who were strong and successful and ambitious and sexually active and over 40. I mean, you just don't get that everywhere, really. There's not that same pressure to look 19 forever in Denmark for women. The worldwide plastic surgery statistics came out the other week, and they show the 25 countries where the most procedures are made, and Denmark's never even made the list. I mean, I haven't seen anyone looking unnaturally pouty-lipped or pillow-cheeked in almost 3 years now. So women get a pretty good deal in Denmark. They've had the vote there since 1915. Girls are taught that they can do whatever they like. They can do anything that a boy can do. And even the divorce statistics, which are often cited as an indication that maybe Denmark's not all that, the way Danes see it is that the divorce statistics show that Danish women are free. They are not dependent on their husbands for money. There's no religious obligation to stay together if it isn't making you happy or if it isn't working out. So it doesn't cost that much to get divorced in Denmark either. Although nobody chooses to get divorced, no one sets out to do it. It's no massive stigma if you do. And actually, research from Kingston showed that they looked into the well-being of divorces on women, and women are considerably happier for 5 years after a divorce than men. Sorry about that, chaps. So although no one wants to get divorced, it doesn't matter too much if you do, and even immigrants who move to Denmark, so from places like Turkey, where divorce culturally is not so accepted, it becomes a more accepted thing in the Turkish community in Denmark, for instance, because the experience of living Danishly, these liberal values are shared around. And despite the fact that they get divorced a lot, Danes are also the top of the polls worldwide for marriage. They love to get married. So my Danish neighbor put it like, we like getting married so much, we're happy to do it more than once. It's fine. So, they have a pretty good deal. It's not perfect. There are instances of sexism creeping in. Everyday Sexism launched there in 2013, and they are recording things. But compared to many places in the world, I mean, it's not that bad. The anti-immigration party have been gaining popularity. There are problems. Obviously, the horrific events of February this year show that there is still work to be done, but Denmark is just facing the same problems as the rest of the world. And these are countries with none of Denmark's advantages. So there is definitely work to be done, but in the Danish way, everybody is contributing. There's also, I get lobbed all the objections, and I'm sure there'll be more tonight, and I'm ready for them, come on. But people often cite the statistics about high levels of smoking in Denmark and high alcohol consumption and even cancer. And that's because Danes really like smoking and drinking and eating pork and ice cream and potatoes, sometimes all at the same time. And they're libertarians, and they don't believe it's the state's job to stop them doing those things. So what can you do? They're paying their taxes. They are doing what they want with their body because they believe that they're free. And Denmark has this e-health system. So whereas the UK's patient records system, I think, costs taxpayers 10 billion and counting and was then scrapped, in Denmark, they've had this system in place since 2003, costs 6 million, works perfectly, keeps people happier, healthier, out of hospital, because you feel responsible for your own health care. You can log on, check your own records, speak to doctors. Anywhere you go in the country of your own holiday, they can check your medical records. It's not making Danes less free, it's making them more free, because they're in control of their own healthcare. And this feeling responsible for it, makes you happier as well. So, the healthcare system isn't perfect, but it's working pretty well and possibly better than it is here. So it's not perfect, but I think there are lots of things that we can still learn to them. Yes, the taxes are high, but most Danes don't mind paying 50% plus taxes because they see what they're getting for it. They see that these services cost money, this healthcare, this childcare, the free education, being paid to study, this all costs money, and they believe that it's a worthwhile cause. And goods and services cost a little bit more because everybody gets a living wage. And actually, by now, I don't mind paying a little bit more. I don't mind paying £4 for a coffee if I know that the woman serving it to me doesn't secretly hate me and want to spit in it because she has a decent standard of living, you know. I don't mind only having the choice between 10 brands of bread in the supermarket instead of 50, as I encountered in a supermarket this afternoon. There's only so much bread I can eat, and, you know, I can get on with my day. Shops are closed in Denmark from Saturday lunchtime and all day Sunday because you spend time with your family. But that's kind of okay as well. I don't need to bribe myself to get through the day as I used to in my old life. I don't need to buy so much stuff. So I'm starting to think that it's a deal worth making. And throughout all the kind of research I was doing, I really started thinking a lot about Abraham Maslow, so the US psychologist who is sadly no longer with us, but he had this hierarchy of needs, each of which need to be met before we can move on to the next one. So they start with physiological needs, so things like breathing, food, water, shelter, clothing, sleep. Your basic needs pretty much covered in the developed world, looking at how Denmark is perhaps faring compared to other people. The second rung of Maslow's triangle is safety and security. So security of health, employment, property, family. And then it's love and belonging, so friendship, family, intimacy, going up to self-esteem, confidence, achievement, and up to the pinnacle, self-actualization, this thing that he describes as understanding your own creativity, acceptance, a real knowledge of who am I, what am I for? And, you know, throughout all of my research and my experiences and speaking to my experts and speaking to academics and sociologists, really coming back to this is the science part, you know, this psychological diagram that shows actually it's very clear why Danes have a good life because their physiological needs are met. I mean, everyone has a house that wants a house in Denmark. They have safety and security of their health and their jobs. The state pretty much is taking care of those first two. Love and belonging, well, Danish kids go to school with the same people for 10 years, so they have a real sense of belonging. Family is prioritized in every area of Danish life. They're encouraged to get on with things in terms of sex. They're incredibly liberal, no problem with nudity. Swinging, all of it. So they're really getting to the fourth level, confidence, achievement, respect for others. And confidence and respect for others is something that that's really fostered in the Danish school system and in most workplaces. So in fact, most Danes are getting a leg up right to the top of the triangle. And creativity is something that's been hugely valued in Denmark with these great designers, with Lego, with all of these things. It's no wonder Denmark's pretty happy. And in comparison, other developed countries aren't even getting past the second rung with no security of health or employment, like the USA, like increasingly in the UK. So looking at it this way, it made perfect sense that Denmark was one of the happiest countries in the world. In slightly less psychological terms, this was my life maths. Fewer new shiny things equals fewer hours overtime equals a happier life. So by the end of our year of living Danishly, our first year, we realized that we were happier and we had what we wanted. We had a family and we had a work-life balance and we had good friends there. And so we decided to stay, and now we're in our third year. And we're still learning. We're still struggling with the Danish language. But I've come to learn that there are definite things that we can do to be happier. And the good news is that you don't have to emigrate to Denmark to get all of these. I have essentially taken one for the team, enduring the Danish winter so that you don't have to, and really putting together the top tips for living Danishly wherever you are. So I'd like to share those with you, if I may. And the first of these is, trusting more. It makes life easier, it makes you happier, and trust becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's really worth giving it a go. The second is getting hygge. Light a candle, brew some fresh coffee, be kind to yourself, spend time with friends and family, just the ones that you like. It has to be the ones that aren't emotionally overwhelming. And just be gentle and enjoy yourself. It's not going to make everyone obese if they have one cake. Just have a nice time a bit more and celebrate it, make it an event. The third is using your body. So, run, dance, jump, have sex, bicycle. Just use your body any way you can, and you'll release endorphins, and you'll also look hotter, Danish style. Helena Christensen and that Lannister one from Game of Thrones. Done. Number 4, address the aesthetics. Danes do, and it engenders a respect for their everyday surroundings and good design, and everyone's going to look better by this light, remember. So, make your home as beautiful as you can. Number 5, streamline your options. So, if living in rural Uland has taught me anything, it's that having slightly less choice or just narrowing down the options about what you're going to do and when can really make life an awful lot easier. I don't suffer from the analysis paralysis that I regularly used to on a daily basis here about what to wear, where to eat, what route to take, where to go that evening, what to wear. Less choice, can free you up. It frees up your time, it frees up your headspace to do more things. So if choice is feeling more like a burden than a benefit, do something about just choose to do slightly less, or choose that you're going to do one thing and then stick to it. Or move to rural Uland where there's not that much choice. It's fine. Number 6, be proud. It's very un-British, but I would urge you to find something that you or folk from your hometown are really good at and own it. Like wave flags, shout about it, sing songs at every opportunity. Danes love to burst into song at any chance. And just try being proud. And what's the worst that can happen? Danes are also, they have the lowest level of gelatophobia in the world. And does anyone know what this is? Any takers? This is the fear of ridicule, fear that you're going to be laughed at. And in Denmark, they have the lowest levels in the whole wide world. So they will happily break out into song. Anyone who's read the book will know my husband has been coerced into singing songs about Volvos, to singing songs about your team set to the tune of Mamma Mia. I mean, there's not shame. That nudity is fine, singing songs is fine, waving a flag is fine. Being cool is overrated. Just be enthusiastic and have a nice time. Number 7, value family. This is not my family, this is the Waltons. My family goes in for slightly less double denim, but the point still stands. Family is prioritised in every area of Danish life. And I'm not talking exclusively blood ties here. It's about making time and prioritising the people who matter to you, the people who you're closest to. So with all of the regular rituals built into Danish life, you're guaranteed a party every month. You're guaranteed a national holiday every so often. And because Danes leave work on time, they get to spend time with their family. And because shops are shut from midday on a Saturday, the weekend is really time for friends and family. At Christmas, my first Christmas of living Danishly, I was not prepared for the fact that for 7 days over Christmas, everything shuts down, nothing to do. And my in-laws came to stay. And I learnt more about my in-laws during those 7 days. It was like a bonding boot camp than I have during the 7 years I've been with my husband. I learnt that my father-in-law, left to his own devices, can get through a pot of honey every 2 days, and that he once built a cage for himself and sat in it for 12 hours in Newcastle's Metro Centre as a one-man protest for Amnesty International against political prisoners. True fact. And my mother-in-law, extraordinary, my mother-in-law once flooded a car park during a particularly severe ground frost because she wanted to freeze it because she really wanted to go ice skating. These are money can't buy moments, but this is what you find out, you see, when you spend this quality time, this enforced family time together. So, it's different here, and we have different working hours, and we commute, and life is busier. But if you can leave work on time, then do it. And if at least you can leave your work behind as you walk through the front door, then do that, and spend time with your family, not your smartphone. Something I am still struggling with, but it's really worthwhile. And number 8, equal respect for equal work. So, in Denmark, as I mentioned, there's not men's work and women's work, it's just work. It's all brilliant, it's all important, it's all exhausting. You just get on with it. And caregiving is just as crucial as breadwinning, and both of these things need to happen. So it's just more about a sort of mentality shift. We can't all influence government policy, but we can recognise that even if you don't have kids, or even if you're not interested in a certain sector of society, you need to kind of respect both sides of it. And number 9, play. It should be no surprise that in the land of Lego, playing is considered a worthwhile opportunity at any age. So, Danes are pretty good at setting aside time to bake or draw or create something or build your Lego. And it's something that fosters a great creativity. It's something that's pleasure for its own sake. It can also contribute to new ideas. There's lots of studies that show that doing something manually, using your hands, can stimulate ideas, can stimulate new trains of thought in areas you may not have thought of. So if you're stuck at a problem with work, do something. Just make, build, play as often as possible. The messier, the better. And number 10, share. So this was a tough one as an only child brought up in Thatcher's Britain. This was no mean feat to get my head around this. But life's easier that way, and you'll be happier too, if studies are to be believed. I certainly am. Even if you can't influence a Danish-style welfare state, you can bake a cake, take it round to your neighbours, or invite someone in to share your hygge, and let the good feelings flow. So that's all from me. I would love to now kind of get your views and really kind of carry on a discussion to really build a toolbox for things that can make us happier wherever we are. And if there's anything you don't want to talk about now, then please do get in touch. I'm on Twitter at Miss Helen Russell and Facebook, The Year of Living Danishly. And I hope you'll all try Living Danishly and let me know how you get on. Thanks so much.
Wow, Helen, thank you so much. What a fascinating insight into a fascinating country. I'm sure you're all itching to ask questions and give responses, but I'd like, before we go into questions, to do something to get all of us involved. So I'd like you to just each turn to somebody next to you. If you know them, great. If you don't know them, just say hello. But just share for like half a minute each, your immediate reactions to what you've just heard. What does that make you think? How do you feel about that? Does that sound like a place you'd like to live? Is that very different to your British experience? Let's just share what we took out of that really, really interesting talk. Over to you. Okay, thank you, folks. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt your conversations. Thank you. Okay, so you obviously had a few opinions on the topic. That's good. Before we turn to take some questions, which I'm really looking forward to hearing both your questions and comments, and I know Helen's really keen to answer them, I'd just like to ask for a very brief sort of response to this from Richard Laird, who we're very lucky to have here with us, one of the co-founders of Action for Happiness, who is also one of the co-authors of something called the World Happiness Report, which is the sort of official study that looks at the happiness across nations and, of course, has rated kind of countries against each other, putting Denmark at the top of that list. So keen to ask Richard, you've studied this in terms of the economics and the social science and so on. Does what Helen's described of her experience sort of mirror what we see in all of the research?
Yes, I think it's very much what I would expect from what I've read. I've only been there once, actually. Molly and I went to a meeting of the Danish Economic Association, which was very different from any other meeting of economists that I'd been to, because they were so nice to each other. There was laughing all the time during the presentations. It was quite extraordinary. Actually, some people did make fools of themselves as well, but as you say, it just didn't matter. So, as Helen said, there have been these measurements of the happiness of nations, certainly European nations, now for 40, 45 years, and Denmark has always been among the top ones. And the most recent development, though, is that we've begun to try and explain these differences rather than just notice that they are there and speculate about them, to explain them in a statistical way. So that's one of the things which, there have been 3 of these, actually, and I brought the wrong one. But there's a lot of hard work in here by a wonderful economist called John Helliwell, which I recommend to you, which is trying to explain the difference in happiness levels across all nations of the world. And, of course, what emerges is that income is a factor, but it is one of the smaller factors in explaining the differences, particularly among the richer countries. And the factors which are really important are the quality of human relationships, how much people help each other, how corrupt they are, things that Helen mentioned, how trustworthy they are, and how trusting they are. And one of the things which has struck me, having a little acquaintance with the Scandinavian systems of education compared with ours, and actually it's all the Scandinavian countries are pretty near the top, though Denmark is usually the highest. But there's an extraordinary difference in the philosophy, perhaps an increasing difference, in that in the Scandinavian countries there's a very strong emphasis on focusing on the things that children have in common with each other, and therefore the way in which you would naturally respect all the other children. Whereas I think in our country there's increasing emphasis on how different children are and what distinguishes our child from somebody else's child. And you can see that this focus on how one child or person is doing comparing with another, if that's the way in which we feel happy by doing better than other people, of course you can see that's an absolutely fatal formula for social progress, because it's impossible for people in general to feel they're doing better than people in general. If somebody goes up, somebody else has to go down. So this is the sort of zero-sum feature of, I think, a central element in our culture. And it's actually one of the reasons we set up Action for Happiness, to fight this zero-sum mentality that your main way you can justify yourself in life is by how you do compared to other people. We must absolutely get away from that. And what's so wonderful is that we have this living example of something different, which we can refer to. We can look at the way they do their schools and try and copy that, focus more on the well-being of children and less on this rat race, exam factory approach to education. We can change the workplace. I learned this new word. Is it Arbeitshygge?
Arbeitsglow.
A different one. Arbeit something else. Anyway, it's a very important word, and there's an awful lot. A lot of employers here could learn about it. I mean, one of the most striking things, when these happiness researchers ask people how happy they've been at different points of the day, yesterday, the time when people are least happy is when they're with their boss. And this is a frightful reflection on the way we think we should be motivating our people. We've got to have a system of motivation by internal reward rather than external reward. That's very important. The attitude to mental health, Helen mentioned, reminded me of the Norwegian Prime Minister, Bondevik, who a few years ago had a serious depression and just took time off and got some treatment and came back and won the election. Difficult to picture that in this country. So a huge amount to learn from the Danish experience, and you put it in such a lovely way, and all I can say is hygge.
Skål. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. So we have about 20 minutes left, folks, and love to hear your questions. I'm sure you're dying to ask, but also responses. If we could try to respect everyone else to keep them as brief as possible, that'd be fantastic. Let's start over here. We have a microphone, so please wait for that to come, and we'll try and get as many of these in as we can. Andy.
Hi, you made reference to the Turkish community when talking about divorce, and you also talked about the levels of trust within the Danish society. I don't mean specifically any Danish community, any Turkish community, but I don't know what other immigrant communities are in Denmark. Did they find that the levels of trust, assuming that other communities are less trusting than Danes before they go to Denmark, the levels of trust within the Turkish community increased when they were in Denmark? And was there any difference between how Danes trusted other Danes to how Danes trusted immigrant communities before they'd integrated?
Oh, good question. Yes, I did mean that. So the experience of living Danishly and being part of the education system in Denmark instills the similar values of trust and liberalism, no matter what background you've moved from or what country you've moved from. That is something that Denmark is currently dealing with in terms of it's traditionally been a very homogenous country. And as I said, the anti-immigration party had some gains in the last month's election. So Danes are, if they know anyone, for instance, if they know someone, then they'll trust them. But if they don't know someone, just as over here, there are groups who don't know other groups, so they don't trust them so much. Then there's still a problem. They're still kind of breaking down barriers, and they're still kind of working on that. But for the most part, I mean, it's pretty good.
Thank you. Let's take this lady's question here. Thanks, Alex.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to ask if you can see yourself ever living back in the UK again.
It's a really tough one. We were just talking about it. I was just talking about it with Mark, that I think my family are here, so ultimately I think I will end up here, but it's going to be very, very hard to leave. And I don't quite know how I'm going to manage that so much. But I love England. I love it, so yeah.
Okay, can we just see a show of hands where there are questions? Let's take a couple more down the front, and then we'll go to some hands at the back. So let's take this one just on the left here. Thanks, Alex.
Is the sun sign, something that they miss in Denmark, or they don't bother?
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
The sun.
The sun, yes. Okay, so this is a really good point. So the sun, yes, you're right.
This is the weather, not the newspaper.
Yeah, they don't miss the sun. So the weather, in deepest, darkest midwinter, you can sometimes only have about an hour's sunlight a day. It's rough. But in summer, then you get 20-hour sunlight. So at the moment, I mean, it's just blackout blinds everywhere because it's so bright all the time. So yeah, they miss it, but they have all these things in place to deal with it. They have the hygge. Because the seasons are very distinct, you always feel quite present, and you change your lifestyle depending on the season. So there's different ways of hyggering in summer and different ways in spring and autumn. And in winter, because there are all these festivals, all these regular rituals, it's as though everything's sort of designed to keep your pecker up. Come on, everyone, let's have a party, more beer. So it's all quite jolly. It's like the bit before Christmas in England, but the whole time. But yeah, it's rough. It's rough, the no winter. But this is why I'm saying no one has to emigrate there. I'm trying to do everyone a favour. Winters are hard.
Thank you. Okay. Just while you're there, Alexis, let's take one of these questions here from one of these gentlemen. Thank you.
I just had a question about the overall culture. A lot of the stuff you've talked about is individual, but over here we have a culture where we have the media boosting celebrity and consumption, and there's this vicious cycle of earning more money to buy more stuff. And I just wondered whether there's any threat in Denmark of that coming about. You have a media, people want to sell stuff. Yeah. Does it exist over there? Is it becoming more like that?
It's becoming slightly more like that, but there's, the equivalent of the BBC over there is doing strong, going great guns, and no advertising on that. And they have, whereas the kids' channels here will be trying to make kids pester their parents to buy stuff. The main kids' channel in Denmark, at night time, there are no programs, but there are just as an example, all of the main kids' characters. So, for instance, the Danish equivalent of Peppa Pig, if you turn on the TV in the middle of the night, it'll be Peppa Pig sleeping. So that if a kid says to the parent, like, I don't want to go to sleep, I want to watch telly, the parent can say, well, come on, now look at the telly. Now, Peppa Pig's asleep, you need to go to sleep. So they're quite public-minded, so they don't take every opportunity to sell stuff. They are like, yeah, okay.
That is genius. Let's move further back in the room. There's lots of hands up further back. Let's go to take one of those questions at the back on the left, Alex. Yeah, thank you.
Hello, you said earlier, you seem to be saying that Danes would full employment rights. I mean, I'm actually saying that redundancy, performance appraisals, that kind of just don't happen in Denmark. I mean, or are you saying that support for the unemployed is much better? I mean, people were given more than just a leaflet on how to write a CV and told to get on with it.
I think to answer your question, it's a bit of both. So they have this thing called flex security. So it's easier to make someone redundant in Denmark, but then it's easier to get another job as well, to keep the labour market going. And because everybody's given this, everyone's encouraged to train, and there's lifelong learning. There's lots of help to get a new job, and there's unemployment insurance, so you can get 80% of your salary for 2 years. So A bit of both, yeah. You know, people can be got rid of if they're no good, for instance. They can also be trained. They can also be helped to get the next job as well. So it works pretty well for employers and for employees.
On that note, Helen, I mean, we're in the middle, as all the audience will know, in the UK, of a move towards a smaller state. And people will have different views on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But, you know, some of what's driving that is a narrative that's been created in the UK about, you know, this idea of welfare scrounging on people who are living on the state and not contributing, a really quite toxic narrative that's come into the UK. Does any of that exist in Denmark? Is there a sense that there are some people cheating the system, and is that an issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not to the extent that it is in the UK at all, but yeah, you get the odd story. I think there was a story about scrounging Robert. There's this one man who was vilified because he had not had a job for a while. So yeah, it does happen, but most people still have been brought up with the culture that you help people who are less fortunate than yourselves and you share. So for most people, if somebody's not working, it's probably because they're a bit down on their luck right now and they'll be working again, paying their taxes pretty soon. So it's there, but it's not to the same extent as it is here.
Thank you. Okay, great. Let's take another question near the back. I think there's one over this side, Alex. I couldn't quite see where the hand was. Yes, this lady here, thanks.
Hi, I'm from Denmark myself, and I feel very represented and nicely represented by your description, obviously. It's very easy to feel very smug right now.
You did suck off my interior decor.
But before I do feel that everything you're saying is very true, but I also feel like I want to add that that pressure to sort of keep up appearances in terms of interior design and mind you, staying thin as well. I don't know what it's like in Jylland, but in Copenhagen, there's certainly a pressure to conform to, you know, the size 10 standard and all that. I do think that when I live over here and I'm married to an English man, I do think that they really stress themselves out in Denmark. I see statistics as well that suggest that there's far more people on Prozac and being treated for stress-related disorders in Denmark than there are here. And whether that's because they don't go to the GP and admit these sort of problems in this country, I don't know if that's the case. But I think that's worth bearing in mind as well, that they have a particular, you know, they have challenges and issues that
absolutely
face the rest of the world as well. And sorry, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this, by the way. And you've probably studied it far more than myself. And another thing is, I think the diet is very different as well, and I think sugar-free seems to be the way forward, and organic as well. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if that contributes as well to a stability of mood, and especially in kids. I mean, I feel very ashamed when I, you know, have my Danish friends visit and they see the sweets I give my kids, and that they actually have a birthday cake. In Denmark, you can't even give them raisins in nurseries
apart from on Fridays.
Apart from Fridays, which is the happy day in Denmark. But yeah,
they call it Slick Fridays, which means sweet Fridays.
It's just the rye bread culture, and you know, it's a bit more wholesome, the diet. I think. I think that's a point that might be worth incorporating as an important contributor to the so-called happy nation.
You're quite right, and in terms of new Nordic diet in particular, there's a lot of evidence that can stabilises blood sugar and can really kind of help with mood.
Rye bread is the way. Yeah.
All about rye bread.
Could get that at Tesco.
But that's a really interesting point being made. Thank you for that contribution. There's a really interesting point there about, you know, every country has its own neuroses and things it's striving for, and maybe just Denmark is different. Did you sense that interior decor thing was a bit more like our perhaps striving for whatever it is we strive for in the UK?
Yes, yeah, I guess, but there's still an emphasis on that. You know, it's not about driving a flash car; it's about being a nice person. I mean, it's not as bad, and I appreciate, as I say, it's facing the same problems as the rest of the world, but you don't see anyone looking over pilated or bony heroin chic the way you do in New York and London, in Copenhagen. And striving for a size 10, that's a lot more healthy than striving for a size 0, as you see in other places. So absolutely, I take your point that there's still stress, but you know, perhaps employers and GPs are fairly sympathetic, and there's more of a culture of like, well, we're going to fix this. If we're not happy, we're going to fix it.
Thank you for that. Okay, let's. We've had a hand up at the back here with William for a while. Let's take this one, and then we'll come and take the one in the middle here.
I'm just curious, because at various points in the talk you spoke about things like the fact that nobody spoke to you, and that you had to make a big effort at breaking ice, and wiggling your way into whatever social situations you eventually were able to penetrate. And you've just made the comment that Danes value being friendly people, but it seems to me like it's they have their own inner circle that you've got to break into. And I too have some Danish experience. I have a Danish wife.
Okay, so you know better than me. Well done, you've made it in.
And I have to say, a couple of the observations that we made, and she makes the same observation, is that Danes are very private in lots of respects. So when you're working with other politicians, or you're on the inner circle of your friendship circle or whatever, then everything's fine. But getting in there isn't easy. And also that our observation has been that Danes find it quite difficult to open up to the rest of the world, perhaps, and allow other influences to penetrate their hygge culture.
Yeah.
Could you comment about how friendliness and cooperation works in contrast with what I just described?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Is that it's a real sort of closed off, and then you're allowed in, and then I feel I completely agree in terms of homogenous culture that traditionally Danes have kind of had their own party going on, and as the world becomes more international and there's global mobility, they are having to wake up to different ways of doing things. There are external influences. Danes speak good languages, so they will be working overseas, etc. And they are having to learn how to be more friendly. That's something they're working on. I speak quite a lot at Danish companies, at Danish schools. They have citizenship classes, so it's something that Danes are pretty aware of. As you will know about Jante's law, you don't think you're special, and Danes are quite good at realising their flaws despite their national pride. So I think it's something that's being worked on. And in terms of being standoffish to start with, having lived in London for 12 years, it's something I totally get. So I know that a lot of people that I know from the States or from Australia find that very hard to deal with. But for me, it was like, okay, this is going to take some work, right? Here I go, elbows out. And it was just something that I worked at and something I took as something I was going to have to do. And once you're in, as I said, people are incredibly open and chatty and, liberal and, all sorts of sharing going on.
But why are they not friendly and open in the first place?
I think the weather plays a big part. Having spoken to psychologists and sociologists and even meteorologists out there, I think, as you will know and your wife will know, it's so cold in winter, in answer to your question, that you are literally and metaphorically muffled up. You're not going to stop and say hi to your neighbour because you are trying to get from your car to your house before your snot freezes. It's so cold. And there's not that sort of Southern European cafe culture of sitting around having a glass of wine and just having a relaxing time of the evening. It's really cold. You need to get back indoors. But family and friends are prioritised, so it's letting them in. And I guess there's just it's about smaller groups, and it's about kind of the people that you feel more comfortable with. So I think you're right. Danes are going to have to work on that a little bit, But yeah, I think the weather plays a big part. And because in summer and in spring, my first spring in Denmark, I really noticed people unfurling and opening up, and my neighbours talk to me rather than just telling me off about things. So it does make a big difference, the light and the weather and your mood.
Thank you for that question, William. We've got time, I think, for just one or two more, if we can keep them quite brief. So who's been waving hand vigorously and really wants to be... Yes, there's a lady here who's definitely waving vigorously, and then I think there's another one over here with a red top as well. Thanks,
Hello,
Alex.
Helen. One of the things I think is great about this country is it really supports entrepreneurship and ambition, and it kind of really rewards people who have that kind of ethos. And I'm just wondering, because I haven't been to Denmark yet, whether they encourage that kind of way of being in schools and they reward that kind of thinking in employment, or if it's all just, everything just really nice as it is, so kind of why would you, say past 4 o'clock, why would you work harder and aspire to kind of anything greater?
Yeah, that's a really good point. They do. There are some issues with people kind of, why would you try harder if you don't need to? But because there's also this creativity fostered from a really young age, and there's so much government support for people who want to try something new, that there is this safety net. So the safety net does make it easier to start new businesses. There are schemes in place so that you're not going to get crippled by taxes when you start. So maybe further down the line, you're going to have quite a hefty tax bill. But there are quite a lot of new companies. So where I live, there's a collective of artistic companies that all are in one amazing, beautiful, designy warehouse nearby, and there's kind of tech people in another place. So there is that as well, and they do kind of, because it goes with the lifelong learning, so you're encouraged to take risks because there's this safety net. But you will get taxed further down the line.
Thank you, great question. And then let's just take the one, this lady with the sort of dark red top, Alex. Thanks.
2 quick points. I wonder if you'd written The Year of Living Cornishly, whether you would have found more hygge and trust. And secondly, you mentioned twice that the Danes are very comfortable with being naked. I just wondered how you'd experienced that.
Oh my. Well, okay, so firstly, yeah, I'm sure that there are lots of things that I would have experienced had I moved to a rural part of, not the Cornwall's rural, but to a different part of England than London, or the United Kingdom in general. So for me, that's why it's Living Danishly. It's not a book about why everyone needs to move to Denmark. It's about making a change. Making a life change is hugely insightful, and it teaches you lots of new things. Doing it somewhere that's out of your comfort zone is something else that I found incredibly fulfilling and interesting. In terms of nudity, well, I mean, I don't know where to begin. There's my neighbours, I lived in a Scandi issue glass house by the sea when I first moved to Denmark, and the beautiful lighting's on all the time. They would just walk around naked. I mean, we could see everything. And we became sort of friends with them, and when they found out that I didn't have children, one of them offered me his sperm, the other one offered me her eggs. Just very open, very sharing, graphic descriptions of sex lives. I found out I was writing a piece, and we stumble across nudist beaches all the time. My poor in-laws got an eyeful. And I was writing an article and discovered that Scandinavia's biggest swinging club was just down the road from me. And every public changing room opportunity, really. So swimming, there's no individual cubicles. It's sort of a buffet of Leo Sayer-style bushes. I mean, it's just, and you're expected to wash before you go in a swimming pool. And if you're doing it with your swimming cushion on, you will get told off, and you'll get told to strip down. And when I was heavily pregnant, I went to a pregnancy aqua aerobics class. I mean, your dignity is already left at the door when you do that. But I had my naked shower, and then someone had stolen my towel. Denmark, lovely place. No one steals babies, they steal towels. So I just thought, what? Loo roll and a hand dryer. Not good. So yeah, anyway, nudity everywhere.
Great, what a lovely note to end on.
Sorry about that. It's a lovely mental image, sorry.